The sun hung low over the small, seemingly perfect suburban neighborhood of Pinewood Heights, casting golden hues on manicured lawns and freshly painted houses. Jason McAllister leaned against the hood of his car, a vintage 1967 Mustang, the engine still warm from the drive. His fingers traced the chrome emblem, a quiet smile on his face as he admired the curves of the car. The one thing in his life that wasn't as predictable as the suburb he called home. Life in Pinewood Heights was everything Jason had ever wanted. Peaceful, quiet, a place to call his own. He had moved here 2 years ago, seeking an escape from the city's chaos. The people were friendly, the lawns were perfectly trimmed, and the neighborhood seemed untouched by the madness of the outside world. It was the kind of place where the worst thing that could happen was someone's dog running loose or a garden gnome mysteriously missing. But Jason knew better than anyone that perfection had a price. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the street, he heard the familiar sound of a lawnmower starting up 2 houses down. Just another Friday night in Pinewood Heights. The houses were silent, their owners tucked inside behind closed blinds, sipping wine, reading books, or watching TV. Jason, however, found comfort in the stillness. It was his sanctuary. But there was always a catch, wasn't there? Jason had always known the HOA, Pinewood Heights Homeowners Association, was a little overzealous. It wasn't just about maintaining a nice community. It was about control. They controlled what color you could paint your house, the kind of fence you could put up, even what kind of car you could park in your driveway. He remembered the first letter he'd gotten from them, a warning about his Mustang. It was too vintage for the neighborhood, they claimed. It didn't fit with the modern aesthetic they were trying to foster. Jason had laughed it off at first. Who cared about an old car in a world filled with SUVs and electric sedans? But then there was another letter, and another, each one more insistent, more threatening. He shook his head, leaning back against the hood of the Mustang, his gaze drifting toward the house across the street. There, in her perfectly pristine front yard, stood Karen Blake, the woman everyone in the neighborhood secretly feared. Karen was the epitome of everything the HOA stood for: pristine, perfect, and utterly, annoyingly powerful. With her perfectly styled hair and too tightly buttoned blouse, she was the self-appointed queen of Pinewood Heights. The kind of person who could ruin your life over something as trivial as a flower pot out of place. Jason had always seen her eyeing his car, as if it were some kind of personal insult to her picture-perfect neighborhood. Tonight, though, something felt different. The air felt charged, as if the neighborhood itself were holding its breath. As the streetlights flickered on, Jason caught a glimpse of Karen's silhouette through her living room window. She was talking animatedly to someone on the phone, her voice sharp and cutting. Jason didn't need to hear the words to know what she was saying. She had been complaining about him, about his car for weeks now. This time, though, it wasn't just a petty gripe. No, it was something bigger, something that would change everything. Jason felt a chill creep up his spine. Something was about to happen, and he could feel it in his bones. He pulled himself off the hood of his Mustang and walked toward his front door. As he stepped inside, the familiar silence of his home enveloped him. But the unease lingered. He glanced out the window again. Karen was still on the phone, her voice rising in anger. There was something about her demeanor, something that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. Jason closed the blinds, his heart racing. Tonight it was no longer just about a car. It was about power, control, and a battle he didn't yet understand, but knew he was about to fight. He grabbed the letter from the table, another warning, this time with a legal tone, and crushed it in his hand. His gaze hardened. The game had changed, and Jason McAllister was ready to play. Hey, real quick, if you're enjoying the video so far, make sure to hit that like button, share it with friends, and subscribe for more awesome content. And while you're at it, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. All right, let's keep going. Jason's phone buzzed violently against the counter. He glanced at it, half expecting it to be another message from a friend, but the screen read, Pinewood Heights, HOA. A knot tightened in his stomach. He'd been waiting for this moment, but nothing could have prepared him for the jolt of anxiety that hit him the moment he saw the name. He swiped it open and skimmed the letter. Violation. Notice: your vehicle, a 1967 Ford Mustang, has been reported as a violation of Pinewood Heights Community Aesthetic Guidelines. Please remove the vehicle from the property immediately to avoid further fines. Jason stared at the screen, blinking in disbelief. His eyes darted over the letter again, his pulse quickening. It was the same damn car that had been sitting in his driveway for over a year now, his pride and joy, his escape from the daily grind. He had lovingly restored it over the last 5 years, every rusted part replaced, every dent smoothed out. It wasn't just a car, it was a piece of his history, his father's history. How could they just ban it? His gaze snapped to the window. There, just beyond the blinds, the sharp silhouette of Karen Blake loomed in her front yard. She was glaring directly at his Mustang, arms crossed in judgment. Jason could feel her eyes cutting through the glass, even from across the street. He knew without a doubt, this was her doing. Unbelievable. Jason had always followed the rules. Never a missed payment, never a complaint. And now this. The letters, the fines, the threats. It all pointed back to her. Karen, the HOA's self-appointed enforcer of perfection, had found a new target. And it was his car. His hands tightened into fists, the letter crumpling in his grip. Every inch of him screamed to just throw it all away, to ignore her, to let the rules crumble, under the weight of his defiance. But deep down, he knew it wasn't just about the Mustang anymore. This was war, and for the first time since moving here, Jason felt like a pawn in a game that wasn't his. The second letter from the HOA arrived just days after the first, and this time, it wasn't a mere warning. Jason could feel the weight of the envelope even before he tore it open. His heartbeat quickened as his eyes skimmed the bold print. Final notice. Your vehicle, a 1967 Ford Mustang, remains in violation of Pinewood Heights community regulations. Failure to comply will result in a daily fine of $150. Continued non-compliance may lead to legal action, including the removal of the vehicle at your expense. Jason felt his blood run cold. Legal action? The car had never been a problem before, and the neighborhood had always prided itself on being a peaceful community, until Karen Blake's shadow loomed over it. This time he couldn't just ignore it. He couldn't just let it go. With a deep breath, he dialed the number on the letter, the voice on the other end answering with mechanical politeness. Pinewood Heights. HOA. How may I assist you? Jason clenched his jaw. I received a notice about my car. I'm not sure what the problem is. I've had it parked in the same spot for over a year without issue. It's not an eyesore. I maintain it, and I follow every other rule around. Here. Sir, the vehicle does not meet the community's aesthetic standards. As stated in our guidelines, we require all vehicles to be modern or neutral in appearance, the voice on the other end said, as though reciting from a script. Jason's frustration mounted. I'm telling you, this car, my Mustang, is well kept. I've poured blood, sweat, and money into it. This isn't about the car, it's about me. Isn't it? There was a long pause before the voice on the line replied, colder now. This is a matter for the board. If you wish to discuss it further, you will need to attend the next HOA meeting. Good day. The line went dead. Jason hung up, his mind racing. He stared at the phone for a moment before his eyes flicked toward Karen's house. He could almost see her smirking from behind the curtains. This wasn't about a car at all. It was about control, power. And Karen Blake was at the center of it. He wasn't just dealing with an obsessive neighbor. He was up against a woman who had the HOA wrapped around her finger. A chill ran down his spine as he realized how deep the rabbit hole went. Jason decided it was time to dig deeper. He needed to know exactly what Karen had been doing behind the scenes. There had to be something more to this. But as he opened his laptop, the weight of his decision hit him. There was no going back. He was about to uncover a web of lies, and he had no idea just how far Karen's influence reached, or how much trouble he was about to stir up. The clock was ticking, and if he wasn't careful, he might just end up the next target. Jason's eyes flicked across the laptop screen, each click of the mouse pulling him deeper into the labyrinth of Pinewood Heights' online community records. He had expected some resistance, but the flood of complaints about Karen Blake was worse than he imagined. From unapproved landscaping to noise violations, Karen had a lengthy history of filing grievances against neighbors, always looking for an excuse to get them fined, to get them out of the neighborhood. It was her way of maintaining order, her order, and the HOA was more than willing to help her enforce it. But this time was different. His car had triggered something far more sinister. Jason sat back in his chair, his pulse quickening as the reality of what he was up against began to sink in. The complaints weren't random. They were strategic, designed to isolate people and strip them of their power, one small violation at a time. "She's not just targeting me," Jason muttered under his breath. "She's picking off anyone who doesn't fit her idea of perfection." But why? What was Karen's endgame? The answer came just after lunch when Jason ran into his neighbor Thomas outside the local coffee shop. Thomas was a retired detective, one of the few who still kept to his old habits of nosing around. Jason had always admired his quiet demeanor and sharp mind. "You still digging into Karen?" Thomas asked, his eyes narrowing as he leaned against the counter. Jason shrugged, taking a sip of his coffee. "I'm just trying to figure out why she's going after me. I've been in the neighborhood for 2 years. Never a problem. And then, suddenly, she's all over my Mustang." Thomas gave a knowing grunt. "It's not about your car, son. It never is. She's got a history. More than you know. She doesn't just target people like you. She targets anyone who poses a threat to her control." Jason raised an eyebrow. "Threat? Control? She's just a nosy neighbor, right?" Thomas shook his head, eyes flicking across the street to where Karen's house loomed in the distance. "No, she's part of something bigger. The HOA, sure, but I think she's got someone else backing her up, someone inside the system. There's a network she's built, a quiet alliance of people who let her push her agenda without questioning her." Jason's stomach churned. "What kind of alliance?" Thomas hesitated, then lowered his voice. "A few months back, there was an anonymous letter, a list of complaints about her, things that were buried. Her own grievances about the HOA. She's manipulating them, bending the rules to fit her needs. There's more to her than just some petty vendetta against your car. She's playing a much bigger game." Jason stared at Thomas, his mind racing. "You're saying the HOA's been complicit in this? They know about her and they're letting her run things?" Thomas sighed, his face hardening. "It's not just them, kid. It's everyone who's afraid to speak up. Karen's got too much power, and no one wants to lose their place in the neighborhood. Trust me, this isn't just about a car. It's about her taking control. The HOA, the community, they're all pawns in her little kingdom." Jason felt his hands clench into fists. This wasn't just about fighting for a car. This was about exposing Karen for what she truly was, and he wasn't sure he was ready for the war he was about to start. But as he walked back home, the weight of his new mission sinking in, he noticed something strange. A black SUV parked a few houses down. The windows were tinted, but there was something about it that felt off. It had been sitting there for hours, unmoving. Jason's gut twisted as the suspicion gnawed at him. He turned his head slightly, glancing over at Karen's house. For a moment, he thought he saw her silhouette in the window, staring directly at him. He quickly averted his gaze. The plot was thickening, and he was about to uncover things he wasn't sure he wanted to know, but it was already too late. A shadow moved in the SUV. Someone was watching him. And Karen was only the beginning. The sun was sinking behind the distant hills when Jason parked his Mustang outside the small, weathered sheriff's office. The building was tucked away at the edge of town, its faded sign barely legible, but Jason knew the man inside would have the answers he needed. Sheriff Adam Granger had been Jason's neighbor for years before he retired from active duty. The two shared a lot of late-night conversations over beers, mostly about life and the slow, inevitable march of time. But today, Jason needed more than just friendly banter. He needed help. He stepped inside, the door creaking as it opened, and was immediately greeted by the familiar scent of coffee and worn leather. Sheriff Granger, tall and solid, looked up from behind his desk, his eyes narrowing as he recognized Jason. "Didn't expect to see you in here, kid," Granger said, his voice low and gravelly, the weight of decades of service still clinging to him. Jason sat down across from him, tossing the stack of HOA letters onto the desk with a thud. "I need your help. This HOA, it's out of control. They're trying to take my car, but it's more than that. It's her, Karen Blake. She's running the whole show, and I think she's corrupting the entire system." Granger's gaze flickered to the letters, and he exhaled slowly, his eyes clouding over with an emotion Jason couldn't quite place. "Karen Blake," Granger muttered, shaking his head. "I've seen this before, back in the day when I was still active. The HOA here was never just about keeping lawns green or making sure the sidewalks were clean. It was about control, power. And Karen, she's been in the middle of it for years." Jason leaned forward, his hands gripping the edge of the desk. "I don't care about the lawn ornaments or the damn car rules. I want to know what she's really up to. Who's pulling the strings? She can't be acting alone." Granger's eyes darkened, and he took a long sip of coffee. "That's the problem. She's not alone. And the deeper you dig, the messier it gets. You think it's just about a car? No. It's about keeping people in line, making sure no one steps out of line. Karen's got her fingers in everything: business permits, neighborhood affairs, even some shady dealings with the city council." Jason's chest tightened. "So, she's untouchable?" Granger's face was unreadable as he set his mug down. "No one's untouchable, not even Karen. But you need to be careful. She's got power in this town, and if you go after her directly, you'll have more than just her to deal with. She's got people backing her up, and they won't hesitate to make you disappear." Jason's jaw clenched. "So what do I do? Just walk away and let her run this place into the ground?" "No," Granger said, his voice sharp. "You don't walk away. But you've got to play it smart. Start documenting everything, every little violation, every connection she's made. Use the law, not just your fists. And when you've got enough, you go public. You expose her." Jason nodded, his resolve hardening. The weight of the situation pressed on him, but now, for the first time, he felt like he had a fighting chance. Granger stood up, his hand resting on Jason's shoulder. "I'll back you, but you need to be ready. This won't be pretty. But if you're in this, you're in all the way. No turning back." Jason's heart pounded in his chest. He wasn't just fighting for his car anymore. He was fighting for everything this town used to stand for. As he left the sheriff's office, the heavy feeling of uncertainty settled over him. But something else stirred too, a sense of purpose. And in the distance, he could swear he saw Karen watching him from her window, that ever-present smirk on her face. It was clear now. The war had only just begun. Jason's heart pounded as he stepped into the sterile, fluorescent-lit meeting room of Pinewood Heights HOA headquarters. The long table gleamed under the harsh lights, surrounded by stiff-backed chairs where the HOA board members sat, their faces hidden behind an air of formality. But at the head of the table, Karen Blake sat with her usual smug composure, her arms crossed, as if she owned the entire room. She barely glanced at Jason when he entered. Her gaze was fixed on a sheet of paper in front of her, making a note with a perfect flourish. He could feel the weight of her cold eyes. But he wasn't going to be intimidated anymore. Not now, not after everything he had uncovered. "Jason McAllister," the board president said, his voice high and nervous, "I understand you have concerns regarding the recent violation notices." "Concerns?" Jason's voice was steady, but underneath, there was a layer of fury just waiting to burst through. "This isn't about concerns. This is about corruption and power, and about a certain someone here trying to destroy my life for no reason other than her own personal vendetta." Karen's eyes snapped to his. Her lips curled into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, please. You've been given plenty of chances to comply with the community guidelines, Jason. If your precious car is causing such a disturbance, it's not my fault. It's yours for not following the rules." Jason slammed the folder he was holding onto the table with a loud crack. The room fell silent. "I've got evidence," he said, his voice firm. "Evidence that you've been using your position in the HOA to attack anyone who doesn't fit your idea of a perfect neighborhood." He pulled out the stack of papers detailing Karen's history of complaints and slid them across the table. "You've ruined people's lives over flower pots, over minor rule violations, and I'm not the only one. I've spoken to neighbors, and I've done the research. You're not just trying to enforce rules, Karen. You're trying to control everything." The room grew tense, but Karen didn't flinch. Instead, she leaned back in her chair, her expression almost amused. "You think you're the first to challenge me, Jason? You think you're the first to dig into my past?" Her voice dropped to a cold whisper. "You're nothing but a nuisance in a long line of people I've dealt with. And trust me, it'll be your name on the next violation notice." Jason felt a surge of heat rise in his chest, but he didn't back down. "That's not going to happen. I've spoken to Sheriff Granger. He's already on my side. I've got the legal backing I need to fight you." Karen's expression shifted slightly, a crack in her icy facade. For the first time, Jason saw something raw, something desperate. Her fingers trembled as she gripped the edge of the table. "Granger? You think he's on your side?" She laughed bitterly, but there was an edge of panic in her voice. "He's as much a part of this as I am. You have no idea what you're up against." Jason froze. The air in the room thickened, and the sudden shift in Karen's demeanor didn't escape him. She was nervous, rattled even. What had she just revealed? Before he could respond, Karen stood up abruptly, her chair scraping violently against the floor. "This isn't over, Jason," she hissed. "You have no idea what you're messing with." The room fell silent, the tension palpable. As Karen stormed out, Jason's mind raced. What did she mean? Granger, the sheriff, was involved? Was this even bigger than he had imagined? Jason's hands were shaking, but a sense of triumph surged through him. He'd pushed her, and she was scared. The pieces were starting to fall into place, and Karen's cracks had just revealed something far darker than he had anticipated. One thing was clear. Karen's hold over the neighborhood was about to shatter, and he was going to be the one to bring it down. The morning after the confrontation, Jason expected retaliation. A final desperate act from Karen, a new violation notice, a bogus fine, maybe even another attempt to get his car towed. But when he stepped outside, the neighborhood was different. People were talking, whispering. Neighbors who had once kept their heads down were now standing in small clusters, murmuring about last night's HOA meeting. Jason locked eyes with Mrs. Thompson, the elderly woman who had been fined last year for planting roses a shade too bright for Karen's liking. She gave him a knowing nod. Then came Mark, the guy from 3 houses down, who had once been forced to repaint his mailbox. 3 times before Karen was satisfied, he clapped Jason on the shoulder. "You really did it, man," he said, shaking his head in disbelief. "You stood up to her." And she finally cracked. Jason wasn't sure what that meant until he checked his phone. A video was circulating online, posted by one of the HOA members who had secretly recorded the meeting. Karen's meltdown. Her admission that she had dealt with others like Jason. The moment her mask had slipped, it was all there, playing out in high definition for the entire neighborhood to see. The HOA board scrambled. Within hours, an emergency meeting was called. By noon, Karen had been stripped of her position. The neighborhood had turned against her, and for the first time in years, people weren't afraid to speak out. But it didn't stop there. Sheriff Granger showed up at her house that afternoon. Jason stood at a distance, watching as Karen stormed onto her front porch, screaming about legal action, about how she was the real victim. But it was no use. Granger had an official notice in hand. An investigation was being opened into Karen's history of financial dealings within the HOA. "She's been funneling money," Granger explained later, standing in Jason's driveway as he watched Karen's house from afar. "Illegal fines, fake maintenance fees. She's been skimming off the top for years." He shook his head. "We should have caught it sooner. But you forced her into the open." Jason exhaled, the weight of the past weeks finally lifting. The first time in years, Pinewood Heights felt like a community again. Later that night, as Jason leaned against his Mustang, he thought about everything that had happened, about the fear, the fight, and the realization that standing up for himself had meant standing up for everyone. A soft breeze rustled through the trees, carrying the sound of laughter from a few houses down. The neighborhood was alive again, and Karen? Her house sat in darkness. She was finished. Jason leaned against his Mustang, staring at the now silent house across the street. Karen Blake's empire had crumbled. At least that's what he thought. The HOA was finally free of her influence, the corruption exposed, and the neighborhood was buzzing with a sense of relief. For the first time in weeks, Jason felt a lightness in his chest. The constant pressure, the shadow of Karen, was gone. But something didn't sit right. The following morning, the phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but the voice on the other end, calm, cold, made Jason's blood run cold. "You think you've won?" the voice said, low and clipped. Jason's grip tightened on the phone. "Who is this?" There was a brief pause. "You might want to take a seat, Jason. Because what you've done, it's only scratched the surface." His mind raced. "What are you talking about?" The voice chuckled, a sharp, unsettling sound. "Karen wasn't the mastermind. She was a puppet, a tool, a distraction. You've exposed her, yes, but in doing so, you've missed the bigger picture." Jason's heart skipped. "What bigger picture?" "Check your email. You'll find a few things. Things that will make you realize how deep this goes." Before Jason could respond, the line went dead. His fingers shook as he unlocked his phone. An email had just popped up, the subject line reading, "You're on the wrong trail." The email contained several attachments, files, documents, and a list of names Jason didn't recognize. But one name stood out: Liam Coulson, the HOA's lawyer. Jason's pulse quickened as he scanned the files, each one detailing the layers of manipulation, corruption, and influence that reached much further than Pinewood Heights. Coulson wasn't just the HOA's lawyer. He was involved in land deals, zoning permits, and, more chillingly, hidden business transactions with developers who had their eyes set on the property surrounding the neighborhood. Jason's stomach twisted. Karen had been a smokescreen, a convenient villain, but the true force behind the HOA's stranglehold wasn't some power-hungry neighbor. It was a network, a shadow organization that had been pulling strings for years, and Coulson was the key. Jason's phone buzzed again. This time, it was Sheriff Granger. Jason, I don't know how to say this, but I got some intel. This whole thing, Karen, the HOA, the corruption, it's just the tip of the iceberg. They've been covering their tracks for a long time. Granger's voice was strained. The real power, it's not in the neighborhood. It's higher, up. And whoever's behind it doesn't take kindly to people like you sticking your nose where it doesn't belong. Jason felt the weight of those words, a chill creeping over him. The victory over Karen suddenly felt hollow. He looked out at the neighborhood, at the homes that had once felt safe, familiar. Now they seemed like a facade. The fight wasn't over. It had only just begun. And somewhere, in the dark corners of the neighborhood, a much more dangerous enemy was watching. If you enjoyed this video and want to see the next part, let me know in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to stay updated. See you in the next one. Your support means the world.